Hello, everyone. Santia here, and today I want to talk about. I guess I'm initially thought of this as assumptions confronted by reality, but it can also be. Basically, it's a journey that I've been going through and will continue to go through as I've gotten older and grown up, and it's rooted in my childhood and sort of. Our childhoods have a lot of influence on us, and in this particular case, what I'm speaking about specifically is my understanding of how the world was as a child and having those assumptions about how the world works ripped away. So, as a child, like most children, I suppose, I assume, uh, I had an ignorance and a naivete about the world. And frankly, I had a really blessed childhood. The overall, like, I got along well with my sister, my parents. My parents have always been supportive individuals of me. And I've not really had any sort of... I've had my own share of whatever my personal struggles are, and some of them seem absolutely ridiculous at this point in time. 7-page double-spaced papers that were due in 2 different classes. I'm looking at you. But what has happened as I've grown older is I've had to be confronted by the reality that the world doesn't work the way that I assumed it should. This particular train of thought, I should say, has really come to a head as I've read a couple of specific things. An interesting article about how crash test dummies and other things don't properly take women into account. So the headline of it was about crash test dummies, but also in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation about the data is sexist. That is the amount of data that's missing about women and the way things work for women throughout the world. And it's things like this that, like, my assumption had been that, of course, you would concern yourself about how things work with women as well as men, and about where differences might lie and things like that. It would seem obvious to me that you would be collecting that sort of data, and to discover that hadn't been happening is one of those things where it's like, why? And that's the sort of thing I'm talking about, where growing up, like, I didn't really truly understand the idea of people having a life that was worse than mine. Not really. And so, like, I was peripherally aware of, for example, the kind of not entirely accurate the not entirely accurate stereotype of poor people in Africa. Like, I was aware of it, but it wasn't a reality to me. You know, as young, I didn't have the ability to empathize that way yet. And the reality of people who, through circumstance, were born into a place where they may not have functioning sewage systems is just, like, it makes me very thankful for having one, but also wanting those people to be able to have a life at least as good as mine. And one of the things that's been painful about getting older is having that ignorance of other people's lives stripped away. Like I said, I had a very blessed childhood, particularly when you take global, everything into account. And I did not have the comprehending that people had it actually worse than I did. I thought people had things potentially different, that people didn't have the identical life circumstances to me. I had my set of things that I had friends with others. So, for example, I had a friend with Sega Genesis and Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and I'd go over to his house and play with him there. But I didn't have that. But, that's a different thing. It's not quite the same thing as a lack of any of the luxuries that I've frankly enjoyed. And the realization as I've gotten older, and something that's helpful to remember is that I grew up in a very small town in northern Indiana, and there really weren't a lot of examples outside of my general demographic to really understand. And I didn't really have an understanding. I mean, kids don't. And then on top of that, I didn't have that many examples that were different. And had another thought that was there that's kind of been lost the whims of keeping track of other thoughts. But anyway, the point that I'm kind of getting at is, as I have gotten older, the ignorance has been peeled away, and what leaves me frustrated is the number of people who do not have a life as good as the one I've had, that have not had circumstances as good as the one I've had. I didn't really comprehend as a kid the idea that, people were born into circumstances beyond their control. That's just not something I understood, that that hand of whatever you want to call it, God or fate, whatever, but that lack of control into your starting circumstances is not something I really understood either. And it frustrates me as an adult that this world is such a cruel place, and that there are so many people that have had things worse than I have had. And it definitely, it's not that I've gone around trying to ignore these problems or ignore the circumstances where people are not. Basically what I want is I want people to be treated as a valuable individual human being with their own unique essence, for lack of a more concrete term, their own unique, worthy, valuable self. And I want that to be something that people look on and regard, in those ways. That when you look at somebody, and this is the plural generic you, because English is stupid and doesn't have a plural you, and singular you is differentiated words. So we have to do silly things like y'all. But that when one looks at another person, that they see another person who is an individual who, ought to be a recipient of love, is the way I'm going to try to phrase that best. And the fact that that's not how the world works is just perpetually frustrating to me. And the fact that it isn't that way is something that I genuinely wish that I could change. I would like to not, because like I said, I was trying to say earlier or whatever, I've never, particularly as far as I know, gone around trying to ignore other people's problems, or generally I've not tried to, but I've been very ignorant of them, which is a different problem entirely. Sort of a lack of awareness, a lack of realization that they could even exist, the problems could even exist. It's very easy when you aren't aware of something to not see it. It's an interesting phenomenon. As soon as you have named something, you can suddenly see it everywhere. And when you have a word for something, when you know about something, you can find it. Unless if it's that specific Lego piece you're looking for at this right specific moment, then you can't find it anywhere. But as soon as you stop looking for it, it's everywhere and you can't get away from it. But I digress. And so this particular problem of, people's not being treated like individuals worthy of respect has frustrated me a great deal as I've gotten older and seen more and more how that doesn't happen, how people are not treated as unique individuals. And I mean, to some extent it's hard when there's just so many different people out in the world that you're interacting with, but on an individual basis, it's worthy to attempt it at least, right? And it's a pain of empathy, because so many people are hurting for so many different reasons, and I feel so individually powerless to do much about it. And I wish that I could. I wish that I could do more. I wish that this world seems to care about people more. And when I say this world, I'm not talking about the physical planet. I'm talking about humanity, individual human beings, caring about how other people are doing and doing what they can to try to improve other people's lots in life. We spend so much of our time trying to improve our own lot in life, and perhaps the lot of our children for their lives. But, like, how much do we look at other people, particularly people with whom we may disagree, and say, this person deserves to have a better life than they have? And I mean, a lot of people, by which I mean a small number of people, do have things really, really, really well. But there's a lot of people who don't. And having to confront that, and having empathy for that, and having friends who go through difficult times and seeing what's happening there, it really makes me wish that this world worked differently. And that definitely affects some of the, like, policies that I want. I really think that universal basic income, for example, is a worthwhile investment. And the argument that I have for it, and I don't know how practical it is to actually make it work, and there's a lot of math that you'd have to do to try to figure it out, and all sorts of random stuff. And I'm not talking about necessarily full-on, like, middle income level. I'm talking about, like, you at least have survival money you can fall back on, sort of thing. But I'm in favor of it, at least conceptually, because I know so many people that it would just help so much. And I've probably gone on long enough, but it's something that I wanted to talk about because it's something that I've been, frustrated with lately, is the fact that I've had these assumptions about how the world worked, and they're not true. Because the assumptions that I had about the way the world worked was a fairer world. It was a better world. And learning that they're not true makes me angry and frustrated, because it means people's lives are worse than I thought they would be. And that doesn't make me happy at all. It makes me very sad. And like I said, frustrated and angry. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap up there. And until next time, everyone, take care. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.